after this I saw in the night visions. And behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke in pieces, and stamped the remnant with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and, behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And, behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of man, and a mouth speaking great things. I beheld till the thrones were cast down. And the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. 1,000 thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judgment was set, and the Sephirim were open. I beheld then because of the voice of the great words which the horn spoke. I beheld even till the beast was slain, and his body destroyed, and given to the burning flame. Daniy yell 7 to 7-11 cfr. I came near unto one of them that stood by, and asked him the truth of all this. So he told me, and made me know the interpretation of the things. These great beasts, which are four kings, which shall rise out of the earth. But the Kochim of El Elyon shall take the kingdom, and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. Then I would know the truth of the fourth beast, which was diverse from all the others, exceeding dreadful, whose teeth were of iron, and his nails of brass, which devoured, broke in pieces, and stamped the remnant with his feet. And of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell, even of that horn that had eyes, and a mouth that spoke very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows. I beheld, and the same horn made war with the Kochim, and prevailed against them. Daniy 7:16-21 CEPHER. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall rise, and another shall rise after them, and he shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings, and he shall speak great words against El Elyon, and shall wear out the Kochim of El Elyon, and think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until a period of time and times and the dividing of time. But the judgment shall sit, and they shall take away his dominion, to consume and to destroy it unto the end. And the kingdom and dominion, and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven, shall be given to the people of the Kochim of El Elyon, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. Daniy 7:24-27 CEPHER.
So there are a couple of things I would like to point out in these verses. The first thing I would like to point out is when it talks about the 10 horns. The 10 horns are a nation, or are nations. And these are the 10 horns shown here in a video about the allies of Israel. Now, after seeing that, you'll realize that all the nations that's kingdoms and nations that's in the video are larger than Israel. So why did I say Israel is the little horn? Well, with what's going on with them and their atrocities as of late. Also, if you look at Israel and this picture of this beast, when you flip the picture of the land of Israel around, it looks like a horn. And there's something that you also need to remember. Israel was never a thing in Scripture. It was a people, not a land nor a nation. The places that they called in the Scriptures was Jerusalem. There was no Israel. Israel didn't show up until 1948. May 14th, 1948 to be exact. You had the land of Judah, you had the land of Edom, but there was no land of Israel. And you also have to remember that the beast is the one that's controlling the kingdoms and nations. The one with the iron teeth. The one that smashes the Koshium. And Koshium means the holy, the chosen, and the righteous under his foot.
17, Britain's Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour wrote a letter that would set off a conflict still being fought more than 100 years later.
His Majesty's government viewed with favour the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people and will use their best endeavours to facilitate the achievement of this object.
When Balfour wrote of his government's intent to create a Jewish homeland in Palestine, 90% of the people living there were not Jewish. Just 31 years later, most of them were gone.
כמה אתה חושב אנשים הרגת ככה? לא ספרתי. לא יכול לדעת בחיי. היה לי מקלע עם 250 כדורים.
This is the story of the British promise that led to the destruction of Palestine and the creation of the State of Israel. Let's start with the obvious question. Why were the British making promises about other people's countries? The short answer, empire is one hell of a drug. This was World War I, and the British were making lots of promises. In addition to promising a Jewish homeland in Palestine, they promised Arab leaders independence if they rose up against Britain's enemy, the Ottoman Empire. The Arabs did. Hollywood even made a movie about it.
Arabia's for the Arabs now. That's what I've told them anyway. That's what they think. That's why they're fighting. Oh, surely.
A month after Balfour's letter, British troops took Palestine, ending 400 years of Ottoman rule. The people who lived there were Arabs, mostly Muslims, but there were Christian and Jewish minorities too. There was also a tiny number of European Jews who in the late 1800s had started building small colonies there. At a time when many Jews were suffering horrific persecution in Europe, they felt Palestine could be an escape. The idea of building up a Jewish presence in Palestine became known as Zionism, but it stayed a fringe movement among European Jews. Many of them felt they shouldn't have to leave their countries to avoid persecution. But Zionism as a political movement took a big step forward with an Austrian man called Theodor Herzl. And this guy is a very important name in this story. In 1896, he published Der Judenstaat, or in English, The Jewish State. In it, he said the only way for Jews to avoid Europe's anti-Semitism was not just to leave, but to have their own country. And Herzl didn't just write. The next year, he organized a conference in Basel, Switzerland, the first Zionist Congress. The attendees agreed on a program which sought, among other things, to establish a Jewish homeland in Palestine and promote Jewish settlement in Palestine. From here on out, the Zionist movement became very active, setting up funds to promote Jewish immigration to Palestine, companies to buy land there, and recruiting representatives to advocate for their cause with different governments. A few days after the conference, Herzl wrote this in his diary.
At Basel, I founded the Jewish state. In 5 years perhaps, and certainly in 50 years, everyone will perceive it.
He was only off by 1 year. Okay, so that is a lot of history, but it's important because the Zionist movement is a critical part of the story going forward, especially after it found a friend in the British government, where a lot of high-ranking officials supported Zionism, sometimes for unexpected reasons. Prime Minister Lloyd George, for example, was a Christian zealot who believed gathering the Jewish people in Palestine would bring Jesus Christ back to earth. Others, like Balfour, believed that getting the Jewish people out of Europe and into their own country would be a good thing. Herzl was pretty visionary when he wrote that the anti-Semitic nations will become our allies. Meanwhile, the Zionists assured Britain that their future country would be a reliable ally. So that's the backstory of how European anti-Semitism, Zionism, and British imperialism all led to the Balfour Declaration, this British promise to build a homeland for Jews in Palestine. Now we're going to look at how Britain did that. World War I had been a conflict between rival empires, and the winners set up the League of Nations to distribute the losing side's territories between them. They called it the Mandate System, putting territories once controlled by the Ottoman and German empires under the, quote, tutelage of advanced nations until they became independent. Britain was given the mandate over Palestine, but the Palestinian people were never asked what they wanted or what independence would look like to them. Listen to what Balfour wrote to one of his colleagues.
For in Palestine we do not propose even to go through the form of consulting the wishes of the present inhabitants of the country.
Instead, it was the Zionists who were consulted about what their vision for Palestine was, and so the mandate ended up incorporating not just the Balfour Declaration, but several clauses requiring Britain to ensure the establishment of a Jewish home in Palestine. British rule was very accommodating to the Zionist project. The Jewish community in Palestine grew with big waves of immigration. They had their own schools and factories and even their own militia, the Haganah, and they were led by the Polish-born David Ben-Gurion, the leader of their representative body, the Jewish Agency. To the Palestinians, it was clear that Britain wasn't delivering them independence. It was delivering their country to other people. In 1936, they went on strike. British forces tried to break the strike with arrests, torture, mass punishment, and executions. Leaders were exiled, weapons confiscated, and houses blown up. Palestinian fighters attacked British and Jewish targets, while British and Haganah forces would carry out joint raids on Palestinian villages. Something had to change. The British government sent a commission called the Peel Commission to figure it out, but their proposed solution was typical. Just draw another British line on the map, divide the country, give this part to the Jews and this part to the Palestinians, and make that part of Transjordan next door. Oh, and because the Palestinians were a majority in the country, 250,000 of them would have to be removed by force to make the Jewish state viable. Remember, these were the proposals that were meant to calm things down. Spoiler, they didn't. Instead, the revolt continued until 1939, by which time about 10% of Palestine's adult male population had either been killed, injured, arrested, or exiled. The British government really needed a solution. So, here comes another report.
The Commission is studying the 20-year-old Jewish settlements in British-mandated Palestine.
The 1939 White Paper created a conflict between the British and the Zionists for the first time, because it rejected partition and said the solution was for Palestine to gain independence within 10 years, with everyone living there sharing it together. Crucially, it also imposed severe limits on Jewish land purchases and immigration. To the Zionists, this felt like a betrayal. In response, some set off bombs across the country, killing dozens of Palestinians. But soon, everyone was distracted by something much bigger. More than 60 million people were killed in World War II, including 6 million Jews murdered in Nazi death camps. Jewish survivors fled Europe, with a large number of them trying to find safety in Palestine despite the British limit on Jewish immigration. This set off a more direct confrontation between the Zionists and the British, with Palestinians often targeted as well. The Zionists knew two things. Militarily, they were stronger than the Palestinians, and Britain was exhausted by World War II, so it wouldn't have the stomach to keep fighting in Palestine. They were right. In 1947, after 30 years of occupation, Britain announced it was quitting Palestine and asked the newly formed United Nations to clean up its mess. Alright, 1947 and 1948 are the most pivotal years in this story, so let's take a look at how things are lining up. During British rule, Jews had gone from 10% to 30% of the population, and owned about 6% of the land. Under Ben-Gurion's leadership, the Jewish Agency was pretty much functioning as a government for the Jewish community. And the Zionist militias had tens of thousands of soldiers, modern weapons, and officers who'd already fought in World War II. On the other side, the Palestinians hadn't been allowed to develop their own administration or military. But as they waited for the UN solution, they were still the majority all over the country. November 1947, the UN, then only made up of a fraction of the world's countries, voted to partition Palestine. This plan marked off 55% of the country for a Jewish state, but the UN never explained how it could be a Jewish state when half the people in its territory were Palestinian. To nobody's surprise, Palestinians, and in fact all Arabs, rejected the UN's plan. Ben-Gurion and the Zionist leadership accepted, but they saw an opportunity. With the British on the way out, the Zionists knew they would have the strongest military in Palestine. Their forces were instructed to seize more territory than they'd been awarded by the UN, and to do what was necessary to reduce the number of Palestinians in it. In cities like Haifa, the militia set off car bombs in Palestinian neighborhoods. They attacked villages and forced residents out.
Haganah troops have driven the Arabs out of the beleaguered city, taking many prisoners.
After inspecting parts of western Jerusalem that had been emptied of Palestinians, Ben-Gurion said,
"In many Arab neighborhoods in the West, you do not see even one Arab. If we persist, it is quite possible that in the next 6 or 8 months there will be considerable changes in the country, and to our advantage."
One of the events that helped speed up these changes took place on April 9th, 1948, when the village of Deir Yassin was attacked. A British government report to the United Nations describes the scene. 250 people were killed in circumstances of great savagery. Women and children were stripped, lined up, photographed, and then slaughtered by automatic firing. The story of what happened at Deir Yassin set off panic all over the country. As news spread, people fled, fearing they would be next. Historians have recorded dozens of similar massacres during this period. Each time, they would result in entire communities fleeing.
תמיד הייתה הוראה של בן-גוריון לגרש את האנשים משם. גרשנו את המקום, טרקטורים עוד חרשו את המקום. חרשו. לא נשאר זכר שכבר. למה? לא רצו שתהיה, זה לא חזרה ולא זכר של המקום.
By the time Britain ended its mandate on May 15, 1948, 250,000 Palestinians had fled. The night before, David Ben-Gurion announced the founding of the State of Israel, with himself as its first prime minister. He was standing under a giant portrait of Herzl, 51 years after Herzl had predicted this very moment. The Zionist militias came together as the newly formed Israel Defense Forces, but the fighting wasn't over. With the British out of the way, soldiers from several Arab countries entered Palestine. But the Israeli army was better equipped, better organized, and unlike the Arab armies, had a unified command and backing from several European countries. Israeli forces pushed into places that the UN had assigned to the Palestinian state, like the towns of Lidda and Ramle. 50,000 people were forced to flee from there, many on foot, in what became known as the Lidda Death March.
And today,
a remarkable number of videos posted by Israeli soldiers on social media depicting themselves pillaging property, mocking the death and destruction that they are causing, and most egregiously torturing, humiliating, and mocking detained Palestinian prisoners.
The images of mass arrests, of torture of Palestinians, of numbering their bodies, which is reminiscent of images all of us have seen from Guantanamo and Abu Ghraib. These images are testament to what Palestinians have long been saying, which is that this settler colonial regime is utterly violent. They show the nature through which this genocide is unfolding in the Gaza Strip. They also show the extreme brutality and torture, violence, utter disregard of human life transforming these violent conducts into a spectacle to be viewed and watched on social media posts.
They lack specific intelligence about who actually might be Hamas, and because they lack intelligence, they therefore are rounding up everyone in order to hope to extract information through interrogation. The fact that they've been stripped to their underwear is, a manifestation of cruel, inhumane, and degrading treatment, which is also illegal in addition to torture. The fact that they're photographing these things, it's like trophy shots. What this depicts, I think, very vividly is dehumanization and torture. The idea that somebody can be just like their body is just being attacked, in their most vulnerable position. His hands are bound behind his back. He's lying face down, soldiers stepping on his face. In a sense, it epitomizes torture in general, purposefully harming someone who's in custody. That custodial relationship is a particularly vulnerable one where, the custodians have all the power and the prisoner, who is, in this case, not only on the ground and tied up, but completely powerless.
The images are showing us and telling us how central imprisonment or carceral practices are to this settler colonial regime. The torture, humiliation, and degrading conduct against Palestinians is not simply restricted to the Gaza Strip. There are also images and videos that have been circulating through the West Bank. Since October 7th, over 7,000 Palestinians have been detained, which is a number unheard of over the past decade.
Israeli soldiers have quite remarkably taken to converting their massive, really unprecedented destruction of Palestinian homes, hospitals, mosques, universities, churches, schools, into entertainment videos. There's one video where Israeli soldiers are showing some residential homes that they've set on fire and attached a song.
This house is on fire.
There have been many images of Israeli soldiers who've ransacked Palestinian homes and confiscated their personal goods. One in particular is the red negligee that appears to be seen in so many Israeli videos where Israeli soldiers are mocking and advertising their very deliberate intrusion of the home of a Palestinian woman, the confiscation of her most intimate apparel, and flaunting that in a way that's definitely intended to be provocative and humiliating.
The videos further reinforce a discourse that is coming out of every sector of the Israeli official machinery, where all Palestinians are the enemy. Many officials have said they deserve to be eliminated. And you see it manifested in that kind of joie de vivre, that soldiers are expressing as they destroy Palestinian homes. And there is a consumption of this kind of image that kind of fortifies the anger, the hatred, the anti-Palestinian sentiment, and the kind of complete disregard of the humanity of Palestinian civilians.
There's such a high level of confidence among these IDF soldiers that they can do whatever they want. To say to the whole world, look at what we're doing to Palestinians in Gaza, look at how we are brutalizing detainees, look at how we're humiliating every single man, woman, and child as we destroy their homes, set fire to them, and make fun of it. And they are provoking and challenging the whole world to say, we can do this, we can get away with it, and no one in the world can stop us. No Israeli has found themselves sanctioned by the international community, by countries that have these tools. which again has only reinforced the belief of Israeli soldiers that they are immune, that they are exempted from complying with international laws, from basic human rights laws, that they are above the law.
And unto the angel of the called out assembly in Smyrna write, These things says the first and the last, which was dead and is alive. I know your works, and tribulation, and poverty, but you are rich, and I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Yahudim, and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. Chizayan Revelation 2:8-9 Sefer. I know your works. Behold, I have set before you an open door, and no man can shut it. For you have a little strength, and have guarded my word, and have not denied my name. Behold, I will make them of the synagogue of Satan, which say they are Yahudim, and are not, but do lie. Behold, I will make them to come and worship before your feet, and to know that I have loved you. Chizayan Revelation 3:8-9 Sefer.
And whosoever shall not receive you, nor hear you, when ye depart thence, shake off the dust under your feet for a testimony against them. Verily I say unto you, it shall be more tolerable for Sodom and Amorah in the day of judgment, than for that city. Mark 6:11 Sefer.